Hey everybody, how's it going? Hobbit Bilbo Man here, bringing you another tavern chat with Gnome in a Hat. I'm your host, as always, Hobbit Bilbo Man. I hope you're all having a really good evening, and I hope I'm coming in nice and clear for you guys. It should be. And today, I have a really awesome guest for our second episode, and I couldn't believe we found him. We called him out last episode. It looks like he's here now. My guest is Zanriel the Great, original leader of Order of Twilight, my original guild during Vanilla WoW. How are you doing tonight, Zanriel?
Hey, I'm doing really great. Actually, it's Friday, right?
Friday's always a good day. I hope you guys can hear him good. And yeah, so for the next however long, we're going to talk about some really interesting ups, downs, in betweens, and insanity and great times that happened during my time in Vanilla WoW, at least the first year and a half. And Zan has been so gracious as to come on and talk with me. So, just a quick recap before we get to all the action. Last time we talked about all the different types of guilds: raiding guilds, casual guilds, guilds in between, role playing, PvP, all those things. And I really kind of struck a chord with me thinking about my original guild, which was Order of Twilight. Now there's Circle of the Phoenix. And I went looking for Zan. I had been looking for him for a while, and we found him, and we hit it off last night. Just chatted for about 2 hours actually, and it was great. Hey, Whip Slingers, good to see you. Yeah, so I got Zan here, and yeah, we're gonna get right into it. So, Order of Twilight, my original guild. Tell me a little bit about first, Zan. What was how did Order of Twilight even come to be? It wasn't even a pre-launch guild, right? You were in the game beforehand.
Right. So I don't know. It might have been a pre-launch because it was really really close. Because I started about. Well, it was kind of like their version of early access. It was like an early beta or whatever. It was like 2 or 3 weeks before the game actually released for the general public.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not sure how I got into that, but anyway, and I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was like after the game actually released officially, but
Right.
up until then, I joined a guild. It was called Angels of Honor, and um, I had been a guild leader before. I'd been a guild leader in Dark Age of Camelot, and on two different servers there, and there were two different types of guilds. The first one was the first one was kind of it was basically like our an early version of growth and nourishment, which was like the leveling and alts type of council that we had. Anyway, we can get more into that later if you want to.
Sure, of course.
Um, anyway, so it was like that. We were there to help everybody and see what we could do to try to make the server stronger because it was a PvP centric guild. So a PvP centric game. So the whole idea was, hey, let's see if we can make the realm stronger by helping people level faster and leveling with them and stuff. And we just kind of took that on as our mission. And the name of the guild was Catalyst. And then after that, there was a PvE co-op server that opened up, and so I was like, hey, you guys run it. You're doing great. I'm going to go over there because I'm not interested in PvP at all. And that one was called Divine Ascension, and it was more like a general do everything kind of guild, but it wasn't nearly as structured as what Order of Twilight became. Anyway, so I had already had experience being in different guilds and also leading guilds, and this one came up. It was called Angels of Honor, and I thought that was pretty cool because the last guild I was in was called Divine Ascension. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll check them out. And it turned out to be one of the worst run guilds I've ever been in. No offense if anybody remembers that guild, I'm sorry, but I'm just being honest. It was really, really bad.
Can you tell me about tell everyone about the rug?
Oh yeah. So okay. So first of all, the guild leader was, and I don't know if it was like a power move or what it was, but he was just really flaky. He was always late to everything, and sometimes he didn't even show up, and he was always coming in. And but then when he'd call meetings, he expected everybody to stand around like this rug, and it was in this room. I don't even remember where it was. Probably Stormwind somewhere, one of those little off to the side places. And I'm almost positive it was Stormwind. Anyway, and so when he'd call you, he would ask you to stand on the rug, and then he would ask you to kneel. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so stupid. And then he would tell people like, this is what you're doing, like this is your role in the guild.
Didn't
And
ask, right? Like it
his
was just literally like
yeah,
you're gonna do this.
right, you're voluntold. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So what he wanted me to do was like marketing and outreach and stuff, basically recruiting. And we did. And at that time I had already kind of made a few friends in the guild, and we kind of run around together, and Kirok was one of them. And he was actually, it's kind of, he'll tell you this if you ever talk to him, but he he was, so I recruited him. I was out there in Darkshore and doing the recruiting in like the Elflands, and I was a human. And he was like, so yeah, what does your guild need? And I was like, well, we need warriors. So that's great that you're a warrior. And he's like, cool, cool. So so we ran around together quite a bit, and we became friends, and we're in this guild, and we're like, we look at each other. It was, I'm pretty sure it was right after that meeting. I was so pissed. And we looked at each other virtually, right? We're chatting, like whispering and stuff. We're
Right,
like,
of course.
we're like, we can do better than this. Let's just poach all the people that we can find, and then see who else we can get, and let's get a charter, and let's get the bleep out of here. We didn't cuss, neither one of us did, but anyway, that was, basically how the conversation went.
So that's
So
cool.
yeah, so we
So
rounded
from
up like two or three, four or five people. I don't know how many, and then I had like two accounts. My wife played, and I think I might have gotten my cousin. I'm pretty sure I did. Anyway, we managed to get the signatures, and we started Order of Twilight, and we were like, we're gonna do this right.
so you did that and you had like a really nice website presentation which I remember being I remember what I literally I think when I was on Feathermoon and I typed in Feathermoon mature older guild and it was the first thing that came up. It was the first
You
like
know,
hit.
what's kind of funny is that like we were a guild for a few months. So the game came out in November of 2004, and it wasn't until March of 2005 when everyone's like, we need a website. We need a website. Back then they didn't have like Facebook and stuff like that. So I'm like, you guys want a website? Yeah, 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 yeah. So I just went to a host and spun up a little message board, and I'm like, there you go. We got a website. And then we went to like the Blizzard forums and stuff and started recruiting there. And we got a little bit of pushback from our members from we were doing some pretty aggressive recruiting, but we were trying to grow like really fast because we had a very, very ambitious plan, and we knew we needed people.
Right. And I remember it wasn't uncommon for to log on and have 250 people online at the height of it. I remember that.
Yeah, so the way we were set up is we wanted to be everything for everybody, and we also wanted it to be like grassroots driven and like power to the people kind of thing. So we ran a lot of polls and stuff like that, but ultimately we were like, yeah, we want to be the best at rating, we want to be the best at role playing, we want to be the best at PvP, and we also want to make sure we're always there to help people so that when they're coming up through the ranks and coming up through the levels, that they don't feel stranded, that they get all the support they need. And to do that, because it's so many different areas of interest, you really need a lot of people. Otherwise, there's always going to be one corner that's going to be, feel stifled or strangled or whatever.
So were your officers, your original officers, were those? You guys have like strange names for your officers too. Like again, a lot of people aren't going to know them, but just say for the sake of it, your officers were the original ones. Just those people that you brought along with you. Is that how you picked your original officers?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Like the founding members were pretty much grandfathered in as officers,
Right.
and that's usually a perk of getting people to sign your charter.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd
I,
say.
I I can't say 100% that they did all end up as officers, but I'm pretty sure most of them did. I just, I don't know. It's been so long,
Well, it's
But
been almost 15 years.
yeah,
So
yeah. And
there's
well, we founded in 2004, and so it has been 15. No, yeah, you're right. It
Yeah.
was at the end of 2004,
Yeah.
so almost 14 years.
So the guild really grew. I remember I joined and I was so enamored with it. Now, and there was kind of like at the beginning, the guild kind of had what I like to call the guild honeymoon phase, where a lot of
Right.
everything's like going right. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're growing, everyone's having fun, everyone's leveling. Isn't that something crazy to say now that like people were leveling? Like you don't say
It,
that anymore. People level the first week now in an expansion.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. And back then, when it started, it took. Well, I think it took me about 2 months to hit level 60, but I was really busy with a whole bunch of other stuff, plus like all the alts and stuff like that. But I think it took most people at least a month to get to level 60. So it
Yeah.
was a really, really big deal. And yeah, during all that time, I mean, it was wow, it was butterflies and rainbows because we had not a care in the world. The only drama we had was, are we growing too fast? I had two officers in particular that kept bringing that up at almost every meeting. Like, we're growing too fast. We need to stop recruiting so much, and we need to start screening people better. And we're like, but we need these people. So there was a little bit of back and forth there, but it was nothing compared to when we got up when we started hitting critical mass for rating.
Well, we'll
That's
talk
when
about that in a bit. Let me. I want to talk a little bit about my beginnings there. So I remember I went to the website and I put up like you had to put up I don't even remember like a thing about yourself. And I remember they were like, "Oh, we have to do an interview with you." And I remember two of the officers interviewed me and I got in just fine. It wasn't a big deal. And then I was like, "Oh, who's the guild leader? That guy must be like some crazy personality that like is kind of scary and stuff. Like he must be this big power like super person." And so for a long time, Zanriel, because you were on break for like a little bit, and Zanriel to me was sort of a larger than life figure that I must meet and like show my appreciation for being in this insanely awesome guild. And I remember when you came on, I pushed hard to get to group with you. And I'll never forget, I had wrote a whole article about me and Sprocket. Actually, there's a guy named Sprocket. We kind of had wrote together this article about AOE farming, and I kind of went over the idea with you. And I'll never forget you, me, and your mom, who actually played at the time. I don't, what zone was it? We were just like pulling these orcs, like we would pull these your mom would run around in a circle and pull massive amounts of mobs together, and we would do it for hours.
yes, yep. And what's funny is that we started carrying that over to other, like, we'd get together with other people and do the same thing. I
Y-
remember it was one of the priests. It was one of the ones that Jarek. It was Jarek. Do you remember?
yes.
Yeah, we were helping him levels. Me and my mom were, and we used your tactics.
Thanks. Yeah. And then it was like you and I hit 60 and we were like doing tier 0 dungeons together. Remember we had to get our magister set?
Yes, and that stupid at Stratholme. That guy, he would not drop the pants, and I was so mad. I must have killed him at least 20 or 30 times before I finally got those stupid pants. And by the time I did, I didn't even need the pants anymore. But I
Yeah.
was like, I'm gonna get those.
And then it was remember you were like, "Well, maybe the mount will drop?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We used to go back and try to get that mount.
Yeah, it was like it's not happening.
Yeah.
And I touched on this in the last episode about drop the pants. Yeah, exactly. Isaac cut. Yeah, yeah. They gave 2x. No, they didn't give 2 XP each. Actually, it's worth it. So also we um. I touched on this last time. I was going through, and I've touched with you guys a lot that many of you know I have bipolar disorder and some PTSD problems, and among other ridiculous things. And at that time, I didn't know that. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. And Zan, when he was on, was always kind to me, um, and I wanted so much to help the guild. And even though I might have slipped up from time to time, he always had my back and tried to see the best in me. And he didn't know it at the time, but he was you were a very close friend, like closer than you could possibly imagined. Uh, and I just never knew how to like fully tell you how much it meant that you like took time out of your day of a guild with like 500 people in it to spend time with just me, and that
Well,
that meant a lot.
I really I really, really cared for you, like as a person, like deeply cared for you. I thought, but I'm kind of that way towards everybody, like most people,
Mm-hmm.
but you especially for some reason, and I think part of it was just your dedication, and you really, really wanted to make everything work, and I really wanted you to succeed, and I did everything I could to try to help you, but I still had to get everything through the officers because we were democratically run, and we ran polls and everything. So I wouldn't just couldn't or wouldn't just like promote anybody that I wanted to. It always had to be a group decision. And yeah, I mean there was things that you had still not dealt with yet that had caused
Oh, I had personal
like
demons.
little tiny issues here and there that held you back at the time, and it broke my heart.
That's all right, man. There were demons that I hadn't conquered yet, and that happens. And boy, that kind of leads like think about that. You were what don't they teach in guild leader school? Counseling. Did you know
Yes.
you were going to be a counselor when you formed a guild
Well, I mean, like I said, I had done guilds for a couple years already as a guild leader. So
at
I
this
had
level
been,
though?
I
This large,
no,
this
no, not
yeah.
quite, no, nothing close, nothing even close to that. I think the biggest guild before maybe had like 40 to 60 members.
Okay.
So yeah, so we might have had at most like 8 to 10 people online, during peak. So it was nothing compared to what we were in at that time. And yeah, well, and the way WoW is structured with the intense rating schedules that you have to keep, and trying to please everybody, and having to put together like 40 people for a raid, at and several other factors, but just the game itself was structured. It brought up it brought out a lot of it brought out the best in people, but it also brought out the worst in people, and you had to learn how to navigate that. And it was very challenging for everybody because we were trying to do well. We felt an obligation because it was like a social the main social outlet for most of our members, and we were like, we've got to do this right. We got to give them a good experience, otherwise we're not. I don't know. It's almost like a moral obligation. You just have to do your best, and sometimes that means really sitting down with people and talking to them like at a really deep level to try to understand where they're coming from and to help them. And sometimes it took a toll on you sometimes because that responsibility felt like a burden, and that's part my fault because I take things on too much, too much weight from other people, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
Right.
But on the other hand, I would like to think that we helped a few people.
I'm sure. Well, didn't you have a member where we had a member that didn't they have a severe addiction to the game or
Yeah,
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 you don't
we
have to
had a
name any names. You can say he or she, but
yeah, we had one member that I remember pretty vividly early on, one of our officers, and she got to a point where she was playing almost 24/7, and you'd never log on and not see her on. Like you could
mhm.
log in at 3 a.m. and you'd see her there. And she started getting really, really paranoid and cynical and uh, irrational, delusional, and like there's no dealing with that kind of stuff. You just have to hope that when you kick that person out or that person leaves, that the fallout, doesn't ruin the guild.
We'll talk about
And
that later.
yeah, but
Yeah.
anyway, I'm pretty sure that one was dealt with pretty smoothly. It wasn't any big deal. I think she just left on her own. She realized that she had problems, and she was like, "Okay, I'm going to go deal with this." And we didn't ever hear from her again after that.
Yeah, and did
But it was really sad because when she was good, she was really good. She was like the best officer you could possibly hope for, but she just drove herself off the cliff.
we're like, let's think of a good term for that. Yeah, off the clip. Yeah, hopefully she turned out okay, P. Fritz. We always hope for the best for people in here, obviously. Um, Now, drama is always can be a big issue, and again, I don't want to go into the major stories yet because we're still like, hey, things are good. Like people are hitting 60, and but I don't think a lot of people had figured out what like rating was just yet. You know what I mean?
Yes, so right, and early on, the only raids people could do were the 10-man raids, and people were starting to throw those together like impromptu, and I was still like in my 40s or 50s. I was still trying to get up to that level, and people were already starting to go into raids.
The
The
little
really hardcore
ones,
people
the
were.
little ones.
Yeah, right,
Yeah, like the
right,
upper
like the
Blackrock
entry level.
spires.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, Sholo, Strath, all that stuff. Yeah,
Yep.
not the. But people didn't even really understand what, like the 40 man, like Molten Core. They didn't really even know that that existed yet.
Nobody had any concept that of what 40-man raiding was like compared to 10-man raids. People were like, "Hey, we're raiding." Whoa,
Yeah,
that ain't raiding.
that's
Like City of Heroes has a group size of 8 people, so yeah, that ain't raiding.
yeah. Boy, City of
Oh well,
Heroes.
so did Dark Age of Camelot too. It
By the way,
also
I don't know
has
if you
a
knew Zan. I
group
played
size.
DAOC.
Oh yeah,
I did. Yep,
wow,
yep. I did. Yep.
yeah, it's a classic. I still hop on there every once in a while.
Uh, the only one I hop on, I'll play on UO every once in a while. Yeah. Yeah, you had no idea, Fritz, that you started playing WoW just as a couple weeks. Yeah, yeah, it was 04, what, November 23rd, right, or 04 or something around there, or something like that.
The lag was so bad. You would go up and try to loot something, and you'd just be stuck there for like 5 minutes, and you'd like cast a line out to fish, and you'd never get it back. Like your pole would just be stuck there. It was such a mess. It was horrible.
Remember trying to walk in? I remember walking up the hill to Ironforge for the first time and walking in. I'm like, there's so many people in here. I couldn't believe how many people were in Ironforge. It was pretty nuts. And then like, I swear on the Alliance side, I think Order of Twilight was one of the like really well put together guilds. There wasn't too many other ones. Like
Yeah, there were most of the other. So there was like some really hardcore raid. I mean, yeah, hardcore raiding guilds, and then there were hardcore RP guilds. Those were the two most common ones that I saw. And there
RP.
were a few that I really, really respected. I was like, wow, you guys, especially some of the RP guilds. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much lore you guys put into this. This is really impressive. Like, very creative.
Yeah, they're like, let's go watch a whole playthrough of Warcraft 1 so we know where it happened over by Goldshire in year 2725. You know, they, they know
Yeah,
exactly like every
yeah,
zone. Yeah, they're nuts.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you would log on.
And
You
then they
remember
have all
logging
these
on?
elaborate rituals. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right, Zan. The first, like when you would log on and it was like, oh, you're number 2000 in the queue.
Oh yeah, yeah, the cues. Yeah,
Now, I wanted to yeah, there's oh that's all right. I had one thing. It's going to be a question later. So, but here is people started to now when you first started, you weren't looking for any at that time like so appropriately this episode is called Game of Guilds after Game of Thrones and you're going to see why in a little in just a little bit here. So when we first started, you didn't have any inkling like that you were needed to look for any knives in your back, right? Like there was no thought even.
no, and in fact, that's always been one of my weaknesses is that I tend to look for the good in people to a fault. So I didn't see betrayals coming until they were like right on my doorstep, and they were pretty severe.
They're already twisting.
Yeah,
The knife's already been. You're dead at
right,
that
right,
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't see it coming until it's already twisting. Yeah.
Right, and that's why I appropriately named the episode "Game of Guilds." I don't know how close you follow Game of Thrones, and but
Well, let me step back a little bit because I mean, yeah, you do see stuff coming, but you still hope that it'll work out and that things will, like, you see things escalating and you just hope beyond hope that things will settle back down and that it won't blow up, but it keeps building and building until it does, and then there's nothing you can do. It's just
Right.
game over.
Right. So things are going good. We're all kind of grouping. Hey, we're raiding, quote unquote, getting our blue set. Right? Like everyone's like, ooh, blue items. These are amazing. And yeah, and then I'm going off of my notes, and of course you feel free to correct me if I've got like the timelines wrong. But I remember at this point we're all kind of starting to hit 60, and I notice that a group of people are posting a lot on the forums and on chat that they're doing this thing called this dragon called Onyxia
Yep,
and
yep,
this
you nailed it.
and this raid called Molten Core. And there's a little like, but they're raiding with another guild.
Yes.
And my first thought was, that's kind of weird. Like, why not? Like, why would you do that? Like, because how are you going to come back from like, it's very, once you're doing it, it's hard to come back from something like that because now
So
you're part of a team.
the thing is that the people that were doing this were the people that we had appointed. They were officers, and they were people that we had appointed to guide the guild to raid. Like, they were the raiding guild. They were the raiding
So
council
let's start over. Let's back up
officers.
a little bit, Zan here. So the way Order of Twilight worked, it was separated into four councils, and one was there was a raiding council, and it was so large that you could do any one you wanted and become really good at something. So there was the rating, the
Yeah,
PvP.
yeah. And now the rating. I'm sorry to interrupt again, but
That's
the
okay.
rating council was called Elite Encounters.
Okay,
That's an
yep, it was.
important detail.
Okay, Elite Encounters. And what would the PvP was called the War Council,
Yeah,
right?
the War Council. Yeah.
The Noob Council or the alts and stuff was called Growth and Nourishment. I shouldn't call it the noob. It's kind of insulting. I'm sorry, Zan. What would you call it?
It's fair.
It's
It's
fair.
totally fair.
Okay.
And it's like, like casual pet players tend to gravitate towards that gameplay style.
What they would do is like so say you were a brand new player and you found the guild, growth and nourishment would come along and go, here's 4 bags for you to start off with. Like they would help you out like that, right? If I remember
Right,
that, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's you some starter bags, and that's been a tradition ever since. We keep starter bags in the bank all the time. I say we. I mean,
We'll
it's
get
been
to that. We'll
like
get
a
don't
few
don't
months,
don't
a
don't
long
don't we don't want to
time.
ruin the story.
But still, I mean, it's we. Okay, it's always going to be
It's
we.
yeah,
I mean,
it's your
I
guild. It's
the
your
first
guild,
man.
right?
I still feel like I'm a part of them.
Yeah.
So
So and then the last council was the which one? The fourth one.
fellowship and lore.
RPing, which was RP,
Yeah,
right, of
but at
course.
the time it was called the Role Playing Council. We
Okay.
didn't rename
Okay.
it to Fellowship and Lore until later.
Okay. So so just to reframe what I was saying so we can get back on track and I'll let Zan take over in a sec here is that the advanced encounters, right, which was the raiding people, were raiding with another guild, which, is kind of weird. So Zan, take it from there.
Yeah, so elite encounters.
Elite encounter. Okay,
And
wow.
then
Okay.
yeah, so yeah, and so these were the people that we put in charge of getting a raid started within the guild, and they sure enough got a raid started, but it was just them and they're the people that they picked, and then like this other guild. And so I approached them, I confronted them. I was like, "Well, what's going on here? We're supposed to be fighting on Nixia. People are asking me, when are we going to start a Nixia?" And this guy, I won't mention names. He was a paladin. He called our guild members. He said these cattle aren't worthy of Onyxia.
Jeez, oh God, that's man. We got. Can I get some ointment in the house? That was a pretty sick burn. Like, holy crap! Like
Yes,
these cattle are not worthy. He said cattle.
yes, he called them cattle.
Whoa,
But
that's
he
not
was
right.
like, yeah, but he was the best geared, most knowledgeable raider that we had at the time. And our hands were tied. Like, there wasn't much we could do because they had a coalition put together at this point.
Right, and they
So
were
you
well
can
geared too. They knew how
you
to
can
play.
imagine you can imagine what happens next. They've got a coalition going. We're demanding that they change their ways. open up the gates, make sure people have an onboarding path to be able to start raiding. That's like, this has got to happen. And they're like, okay, screw you. We're going to take our ball and go play somewhere else. And it was a huge split. It was huge. It must have been at least 40 or 50 members, because when a whole bunch of members start leaving, then everybody else gets scared and then they start leaving too, because they're like, this guild's blowing up. I'm out of here.
Right. Now, and I remember you put a post up saying like trying to explain what was happening, and they came in and tried to post on the website. And
Yeah.
and you were like, so I remember you blocked them, and I'll never forget you
Yes,
put up in
and we did a
you
bunch of censorship. We like moved a bunch of posts around because there were all these public fights breaking out, and that caused a big stir because people started accusing us of censorship. And that's not the first time when that happened, but yeah, what are you gonna do? I mean, you've got like your boards are like blowing up, and it's just flame wars all over the place. You have to start censoring. I mean, Reddit does it. Everybody else does it.
yeah. Well,
People
what
have learned
do you
since
remember the
then. You know,
song you
this was
put like
early
so?
days of
Do you
social
remember what
media.
happened when it all settled down? You put up a post and you put up the Kelly Clarkson song "Since You've Been Gone."
I can't believe you remember that. I forgot that.
You
I
did.
I kind of remember it now, but wow,
Yeah, because you put it up, and I just remember like clicking on the post, like "Since you've been gone," just like.
that is
And
so
then they
early
got mad. They
2000.
posted all over like the official forums that you put that post up. Like they were so offended about it. Like they literally didn't want to play with the guild, and but then they wanted to be in the guild.
Yeah,
It didn't make any
yeah.
sense, you know. Like why?
It,
Just yeah, it was
one thing
bad.
I can say is that no guild that split off from us has, as far as I know, no guild that has split off and formed their own guild has survived. So what does
Right.
that say? I mean, that's got to be some redemption.
Yeah, I mean, I get. I mean, hey, people if people don't, they're more than welcome to try, right? Like, but it's it's like, that type of behavior when it gets out of hand, like those people usually don't end up playing well together.
Right,
Yeah, that's
right,
what
right.
happens.
The social maladaption that they had that led to that situation continued after they left. So obviously they're not going to be able to sustain anything.
Right, yeah. Now, you know,
People won't put up with that kind of stuff. People start to see through it and they're like, "This is stupid. I'm not doing that."
yeah. Well, you know, I stayed through that one. I did. I stayed through, and I actually took it as an opportunity, like, hey, maybe I can do some more stuff with the guild. And I did. I ended up. I think about that time, Zul'Gurub came out a little bit after that, I believe, or around there. And I remember I ended up leading the guild's Zul'Gurub group. Um, and that was the 20 man, so it wasn't as intense, but we did well in there, and yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that. It was pretty neat, and
Yeah.
but I remember being like, we started doing Molten Core, and then I think we did pretty well actually. I don't think it was like anything to scoff at. I'll never forget. I don't know if you still have the picture. I made almost a. It was almost like a meme actually. Do you remember we beat our first boss in there, which was Lucifron? And I made like it looked like a meme, and it was us, standing over the dead body. And I think I put "Eat It, Lucifron" on there. Eh,
Yeah, so after this big split, we're putting all the pieces together and we're self-reflecting as every guild does. And I was like, okay, so if we're going to do this, we're going to have to do it right. And if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And that's when I stepped in and I was like, I'm going to have to lead this. I don't know if it was right. I'm pretty sure it was right then. It might have been it might have been after another little scuffle or a little ripple, but I'm pretty because I do know that I eventually did step in and lead the Molten Core raid for quite a while. I got like a rotation system put together, and I had to keep track of it with the spreadsheet, and I had it all color coded with roles, like warriors were red and whatever.
They
and
should have
had
been
to plug
brown.
people in and figure out who was going, and there was a sign up, and yeah, it was a pretty sophisticated system, and at some point we even had it posted. I think it was in Google Docs, I think it was, or something
I
kind
don't
of
think
like
that
that.
was
I'm
out
pretty sure it
yet,
was.
buddy. I think it was just you just put
It
them
was
up on the.
something kind of like that, but for a while we had the spreadsheet posted online, and where other officers could download it and edit it and post it back. It might have just been right there on the site. I don't know.
I
We
probably
figured out
was.
some way to share the spreadsheet.
I felt it was too complicated, but I was, and you know what? There's a lot of. I don't want anyone to think like me and Zan don't get along. Like we have just reconnected, and we felt it very kind of awesome the other day when we reconnected. And you know what? Some things him and I might not agree on, but that doesn't mean like we're not totally elated with like reconnecting. Um, and you know what? A lot of things that I thought back then were good ideas, now I think are bad. And I'm sure Zan, there's stuff like you think back on and you go, why did I do that?
Well, I will admit that the original version of the like, because part of the problem was that people were saying, "Why don't I get to go?" And they kept going to this raid like every week, over and over. And there were people that were qualified, but they never got to go, and they were like, "Why don't I ever get to raid? This isn't fair." So I was like, "Well, maybe we should have like people take turns." And so at the time when the first iteration of it, I think the only static spot might have been the tank, because you have to have the main tank has to have very very specific gear for some of the fights. So
Hmm.
you had to have somebody that had that gear. But other than that, everybody else was rotating. And looking back, we've we've evolved that system since then. There's still a little bit of taking turns that happens, but there's like a more of a static core. So it's more of a hybrid system now.
Well, the game facilitates that better now
Yeah.
because
And
it
the other
flexes.
thing that helps is that now that the end game content is so well tiered, that it's the onboarding path is a lot easier. But regardless, one way or the other, I still feel pretty strongly that you have to have some kind of onboarding path, because you're always going to have turnover, churn, burnout, whatever, and you have to fill those spots with people that are ready to go, that are geared.
Right. And it's unfair to say to someone like, "Oh, you're not geared, so you're not good." Like that doesn't make any sense. Like that's like the worst feeling when you're like, "I know I'm a good player, right?" And you can't and but no one will let you play because oh, you don't have the gear. Well, I got to play to get the gear. It's such a weird conundrum when it comes to
Yeah,
stuff
yeah,
like
it's
that.
kind of a it can turn into like a catch 22. But I kind of look at it as the similar philosophy to my first guild, Catalyst. It's like if we help the members that are coming up, it makes the whole guild stronger. So having at least some support for that, it doesn't have to be prescriptive and regimented, and like every week you've got to volunteer to run some lobby through a dungeon. It doesn't have to be like that, but it
Yeah.
has to be a supportive atmosphere. And we actually had members, the ones that left eventually, but they used to get, one of them, the same one that called our members cattle. He used to get on to me because I played alts too much. He was like, you're spending too much time on alts. I'm like, well, what is that to you? Leave me alone.
You have a comment from Fritz here. He says, and then the low tolerance for newbies to raiding. Yeah, yeah, and you can only learn this by going on the raid, which is true, which is what we were definitely trying to drive home there for sure. Yeah. People are going to screw up. Be patient. Yeah, of course. Like that's actually when people realize that death is literally a mechanic of raiding. Things are a lot less inflammatory. I think. Yeah, for sure. Well, so things kind of settled down after this within the guild. I'm sure there was still little fires being put out, and a new after you started leading for a while. Then you kind of like brought in a new group of raid leaders, and this was the beginning of another, as I believe you put it, very painful time.
Yeah, yeah,
And this is actually where Zan and I ended up parting ways so long ago.
yeah. This was the beginning of the Lunas Tursic era.
Oh wow, just call them right out.
Well,
Call it what it is. All right. Okay. Go for it.
Well, I won't say anything bad about Lunas. She was a wonderful, wonderful officer and a wonderful first officer, and
Oh,
I
check
really
out.
miss her
I
a
want to
lot.
plug her YouTube video. She did a video called "I'm Too Sexy." Put
Yes,
in "Wow, I'm Too Sexy Feathermoon," and that'll be her. That's her video. It's maybe someone can find it and link it in chat. It's actually really well choreographed, to be honest. But go ahead.
yeah, yeah. It's really well done. And then even before YouTube, she was making videos. She made like guide to
WowVideos.com.
Azeroth, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Welcome to Stormwind. Blah 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 blah. Yeah,
Yeah,
like stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah. One thing that was kind of funny is that like her microphone was so bad.
Yeah.
Her sound, like she just sounded like so horrible over her microphone. And we always like try a different microphone. She plugged a different one in, and it would still sound horrible. Try a different sound card. She plug a different one in, and I know it wasn't her. I don't know what it was, but we just could not get her to
She
sound
sounded
good.
like a robot.
Yeah, it was so weird.
Yep. Yeah, she sounded like a robot. There was actually times I thought she was using some like voice changer and it was a guy or something, but I
I
didn't
never thought
know.
that, but I was like,
Oh.
"There's got to be what is wrong with your computer?"
Well, you got to think back then. People didn't have gaming rigs. Not a lot, you know what I mean? Most people that played WoW, that was like their first real big game.
Right? Yeah.
That was a yeah. Oh yeah. That'll be a time later. I'm gonna have a vodcast about how WoW ruined tabletop gaming for me. But that's a whole other thing. Anyways, so actually, and when these new people came in, if I remember right, the production in raids actually went way up. Order of Twilight, yeah. You found it, good, yeah. Order of Twilight, that's right. Yep. You can link it in chat if you want, Fritz. It should let you. So I think like the raid production actually went up for a time, like things were going well, and but it became started becoming more exclusive again. At least,
Right.
and again, that does what I'm saying doesn't mean I agree with what happened or I'm like I don't remember completely. I'm not saying I just want everyone to know that just because Zan is saying something, it doesn't mean that I'm running something somewhere. We're just going down memory lane here. I don't want anyone to go, "Oh my God," you know. If you're in the guild with me now, don't like everything as I've said it is before. So just we're just going through a story. I just want to assure everyone. So go ahead, Zan. Tell us about the next. This was pretty intense. It got pretty crazy.
Yeah, so this was still before Burning Crusade. It was still vanilla WoW at this time, and we were still trying to make our way through Molten Core. We still had not beat Ragnaros, and and but so we I handed the raid lead over to somebody else, and they were doing pretty good with it, and and we got really really close, and I was like, City of Heroes had just come out not long after. I think actually City of Heroes came out before WoW. It was like 6 months before WoW came out. But I was just really, really itching to play that game. So I was like, I'm gonna go fly around for a little while. I'll see you guys in a month.
Yep.
And so I took a little month. It was just a month break. And I told everybody well ahead of time, I'm taking a month off. It's only gonna be a month and then I'll be back. And I came back and it turns out that they felt like they were doing just fine without me. So that was a real major challenge because I wasn't. I mean, it was just a month off, but I still had a lot of plans, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Well, you're gonna have to step down." And I was like, "I'm not doing that." And so then it started getting into like power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely and all this other kind of stuff, saying
Can I,
that I was on this big
let
power
me back
trip.
you up
And
a little bit, Zan. So I remember the night when everything happened, like when everything finally came to a head. Um,
oh, wait! I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I have a really really funny story, and this happened right around that time, and it's one of the most embarrassing moments of my life, and I can't believe I'm saying it.
oh, go for it.
But we were in an officer meeting, and
Hmm.
Lunas was there, and all these other people were there, and we were all discussing this, and everything was real heated. and I had okay. So remember, this is early 2000s, like 2005 maybe,
Probably 2005.
and
Yeah.
I had like some bubblegum pop playing, like Hillary Duff or something like that.
Oh
And
no.
Luna said, "Can you turn your speakers down? We can hear your music." I'm like, "Oh no,
Oh no, that's messed up. Well, hey, to each their own, I guess, right?
no!" Yeah.
Oh boy, that's a good one. But let me go back to so we had a guild meeting, and I'm surprised I even remember this. And I remember I had kind of been poisoned by this little group of people. They were like, "Oh yeah, you're better than like you don't need Zan. Like you're good. You don't need Zan. You're fine." And I'm like, I guess like okay. So they kind of poisoned me towards him, and they kind of used me to like learn a lot about you, and you were gone. And then that night, I was like, I'm with them. Like so these people literally pulled Zanriel here into his into his own Ventrilo server that he paid for and told him to give up the guild. And I remember sitting. It was in Faralos, and I was sitting on the shore, like, cause you were all standing there, and I was just like waiting on the shore for like, oh, we're gonna get this awesome news, and Zan's just gonna step down, and everything will be fine. Very sad, very sad to think about it today that I stooped to that level and how dumb I was as a younger person. And Zan, I just right here, right on the podcast, I'm going to say it. I apologize fully, and I am sorry that I ever doubted you because, yeah, it wasn't the right thing to do. So I do remember that night. So I'm right, right? They pulled you into your own vent, right?
Yes, yes, and yeah, and then when I refused, it was a mass exodus, and it wasn't a pretty exodus. It was a very very ugly exodus, and almost everybody that left to a member posted something really nasty on guild chat right before they left, and then people were still going to the website and also posting stuff there, and it was almost all rock throwing. I mean, it was rocks after rock after rock, people throwing them at me. It was horrible.
I thought you were going to break. I thought that was the end of Order of Twilight at that point. I left. I will say, I left gracefully. I will say I
Yeah,
did. I did.
yeah. I I don't remember the details, but I'm sure you would have because like we had a pretty good relationship.
I felt bad, but my mind was like, I got to raid. I got to beat Ragnaros. That's the most important thing in the world right now. And I
and
lost
and that's what I
everything.
chalk it up to.
Hmm.
So I don't hold it against any of these people personally. I understand the way the game was designed. It wasn't it wasn't really conducive to what we were trying to do. It was made for hardcore raiders, and we were trying to be all things to all people. So we were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and we knew that. We learned that through all these trials that we were really trying to buck the system, so to speak, and be the kind of guild that the game was pushing. The game itself was pushing against the kind of guild that we were trying to be. So all these fallouts and splits and stuff were a direct result of that.
Yeah, and it's and you've said and you said I think last night we talked about it. You said you that was the worst, right? That was the worst one. You think?
Yeah, that was by far the most. Yeah, there was the most venom thrown in that split.
Yeah, and I was part of it, and yeah, I'm sorry. I just it was I wanted to proceed, and it was like, and guess what? I ended up leaving them, and that's if you listen to the vodcast earlier, I talked a little bit about. I'm gonna have a future vodcast probably about progression and and how insane Vanilla WoW's progression was if you wanted to be like first, which is it wasn't very easy. So how did you rebuild from that? What was your what was what how did you rebuild and make it like the way it was again so that everyone was able to come back together and really enjoy themselves on a daily basis? What was the key?
So I don't remember which guild split it was. I don't remember if it was the first one or the second one. But at some point, we renamed it Elite Encounters to Advanced Encounters because we kept dealing with elitists. And we were like, we're not trying to foster an elitist culture. We're trying to foster a culture of excellence. And there's a difference.
Right.
Elitist is like better than everybody else, and excellence is like building everybody up. We're all going to be the best we can be. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. But we did a lot of soul searching, and one of the issues that came up during all that was all the secrecy, like officers making decisions without notifying the members, and they described it as this black box. That's what Kirok called it. He's like, there's this black box of leadership, and the members don't have insight into what's going on, so it causes them to fear the leadership, and we don't want that. We're trying to foster a community and sense of, like, an ownership, a sense of ownership in everybody. So we're like, well, we've got to pierce that black box. We got to poke some windows in it so people can see it. So then, we started the scribe program. We created a custom rank called the scribe that was able to read officer chat, and they were even able to visit the officer boards. And their job was to basically put out like a newsletter every week that let everybody know what the officers were talking about at a very, very high level.
Right.
So it wouldn't include like personality conflicts and complaints and stuff like that between members, because that stuff has to be private. But
Right.
it,
Of course.
but if there was like some pending decision or something we were pondering or an idea we had, then they would announce that. It didn't last very long, that particular position. I think we might have had like one person that was that role only for a short time, but we still carried on that tradition, and we we started making a concerted effort to make sure that we were communicating more and involving people in more of the decisions. And I think that's also when the Idealist Roundtable was created.
And
That's
that's way too much, Zan. Like you're gonna get people
well,
with the or unless
right.
is there a lesson to be learned here?
A little bit. So we had like most guilds have what they call a full member. They got a recruit and then they got a full member. So the idealist rank was the full member rank. And the idealist roundtable was a forum where we would have frank discussions, like candid discussions with the guild about potentially sensitive topics, and then we'd run polls and stuff like that in there. And it created a new level of transparency that has carried with us ever since, and that still exists. That concept still lives.
So, in the the essence of like what the vodcast is about and this episode's about, and carrying over from last episode, you things happened, and obviously no one's perfect. Like the splits happened because there were some of it wasn't your fault. There's nothing you could do, but there were some mistakes made, and but what the main thing is that you have to learn from that. And it was new, like it was a new thing. So like like no one knew like this rating thing would blow up to what it is now. You know what I mean? Like, but the lesson here is that you did learn, and that as you did learn, the guild became eventually stronger and more stable. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that was very, very true for our guild. We learned lessons from every single trial that we went through. And if you look through the documents and you look through the rules and the charter and everything like that, there's a story behind every single thing that you read in there, or multiple stories.
Yeah. When I was in the military, they used to tell me they'd say like, "There's a rule because someone did it once."
Exactly. Yeah, and we actually went too far in that direction. We tried to codify everything, and you can't do that.
No, no, it's not. Things have to have a natural flow to them, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but we didn't learn that lesson until years and years later.
and that's okay. You know what I mean? Like that happens, and that's just it's part of it. Yeah. And it was just like, when I left, it was all about the raid. Like I was convinced so greatly that if a guild isn't pushing and getting through something, um then then what's the point in being in it? And For some guilds, yes, but like not everyone plays the same, and that's how like with random encounter, I've adopted that the idea that hey, if you want to do something in the guild, that's fine. You don't have to raid, and if you do want to raid, you don't have to be a full time raider. That we have, there's backups and backup doesn't mean a bad thing. Like that's just hey, I can't raid every week or I I just kind of want to go in when I'm needed. It doesn't mean that doesn't mean you're a bad player. That just to me that just means hey, I can't do this every single time. And somehow it worked when I ran a guild in Final Fantasy 14. That worked. Like yeah, it sort of balanced out. You had like three-fourths of the group, all we was like your regulars, and then that last part was that almost it almost made a self-rotating thing without making a rule for it.
Yeah, that turns out to be the case for the
Right.
most part.
Yeah.
You almost never have enough people, and these days people are so spread out and they've got like little tiny time slices that they can play with. But out of curiosity, because I haven't gotten that far in Final Fantasy 14, but how how big do the raids get on there?
8.
Yeah, so 40 man. That's
Yeah.
like
Well, it's just
oh,
well, it's just projection though, right? Like you're thinking differently. Like think of it, and I'm a mathematician, so like the way it's just like perspective, right? So in Final Fantasy 14, we'd have 6 people that always showed up, and 2 people were like the rotating, right? And it's just you just have more people in WoW, and so it's like 26. I mean 28 to 32 people always show up, and then the other part is a fill in. It's just because you just have more people. It's just sort of a sliding scale, so to say. But it now to say though, the now all of a sudden the positions like for Final Fantasy 14, you can't be like, well, we'll just take 3 tanks. Well, you only have 8 people. You can't have 3 tanks. It just doesn't work that way. So it's a little stricter. But yeah. But again, getting 40 people to not stand in fire is a
yeah.
much greater challenge.
I can say this is that like when you talk about a 40-man raid, it's like yeah, 40 people. Uh-huh. But when you're actually in it, especially if you're leading it, it feels more like 100.
Oh yeah.
Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
so many people that you have to manage. It's like whoa.
Yeah, Fritz. I don't like to Fritz says like he's talking about. I never say like this is the cutoff. It for me it just happens naturally. For some reason it just works out that way, because that's I don't know. It's like with 40 people, like you said, Zan. You're not gonna get 40 unless you're in a super hardcore raiding guild that requires it. You're not gonna get 40 people to show up every single to raid every raid. It's just not gonna happen unless you're in an actual guild that
Yeah, yeah,
promotes that.
and that's how the most of the other guilds that were like really hot in the server, especially the ones that were running circles around us because they recruited specifically for the raids. That's it. Like if they needed a spot, they needed a healer. That's what they recruited for. They didn't
Right.
recruit for personality or any other reason. You had to be the slot they were looking for, the role they were looking for.
Yeah, do you remember I think the 2 guilds that I still remember that are still around on the alliance on Feathermoon is Crit Happens. Crit Happens is still around and they were a pretty big another guild. And on the Horde side, Warsong Aces
You know
was
what's funny is that back when we were first starting, the number one hot rating guild that was like beating everybody else, first to this and first to that, it was called of all things Catalyst.
yeah, yeah,
Isn't
Catalyst.
that
Yeah.
weird?
That's strange.
I was like, oh my gosh, they're the exact opposite of the way my Catalyst guild was, but whatever.
So, moving on a little bit, after you started to get, so things started to get back together. You had some really, I'd like to hear some interesting stories of individual strange drama cases, and I know you have a few. So just let
Yeah.
them. Let's get a quick fire round of those.
So do you wanna hear about the cancer girl?
Let's hear about the cancer girl.
Okay, so I'm trying to remember when this was. I think it was. I think it was towards the end of Lich King, or it might have been sometime during Cataclysm. I'm pretty sure it was before Panda. Yeah, I think it was sometime around Cataclysm, and
Okay.
I was active again at that time. And we had this member that she came in, and she was like this 16-year-old girl, and she everybody liked her, and she was really really super nice, and she was always helpful, always giving stuff away, running people through. She embodied our leveling alt council. She was like
Right.
growth and nourishment all the way top to bottom, and everybody just loved her, and she started coming up through the ranks, and eventually she was like, I think I might want to be a junior officer. And we're like, okay, yeah, I think you might be ready for that. And so we were kind of, we took her under our wing, and we were guiding her through events and getting events planned and stuff like that. And then we got her promoted, and she was a junior officer at that point. And then she came to us and told us that that she had had cancer before, and that it had relapsed, or it had gone into remission, and then
Right.
she relapsed, and then it was coming back.
Right.
We're like, oh no, oh no. Well, is there anything we can do? And she's like, oh, it'll be fine. And then she like disappeared. And then one of our members said that they got a message from her mom that she was back in the hospital. And we're like, oh, well, we got to go visit her. And we're like, she lives in Texas. Let's go visit her at the hospital. And people were like holding candlelight vigils, and it was all
Oh
kinds
my
of stuff.
gosh. Wow.
And yeah, and then somebody got another whisper from somebody else. It was like, okay, I can't handle this anymore. I'm this person's roommate, and she has got you completely fooled. She's she's a lady. She's in her 40s. She's not a 16-year-old girl. She doesn't have cancer, and oh my gosh. Everybody was so mad, and like, oh, the emotions were just all the way across the spectrum. There were tears, there were people yelling. I mean, it was a mess. But we really poured our hearts and souls out to, towards this person that we thought was in need. And and a lot of it was the mentoring of it, because we had mentored her, and
Right.
we kind of saw ourselves as like guiding her character, like teaching her how to be an officer, kind of like a junior, like a Girl Scout or something like that.
Girl Scout.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay,
seriously.
I get it. Yeah. I totally feel
Yeah,
that,
we're
man.
like, this is gonna be good for her, and it's like, oh, wait.
Yeah. Now, is this the one where is this the one where this is not like the break though, like for you?
No,
No, that's
that
coming
wasn't.
later, right? You're going to tell us that later.
Yeah, yeah,
If
that's another one.
all right, so
That was hard.
are we still OOT at this point?
Oh yeah, so
We missed something. We got to go back a little
yeah,
bit.
this was. Oh, right. Yeah, I'm trying to put together the timeline. So
Hold on a sec.
I had,
While you're thinking, listen, guys. You think it's easy to run a guild? Listen to this. Like this is it's and the lessons we learn over the years and how um we fine tune everything and we learn like how terrible some people can be, and you have to be on the lookout for that. And you guys, some people wonder, oh, Hobbit, why do you screen? Why do you do interviews and stuff like that? This is why. This is the reason why I do all that, because I want to avoid as much of this as possible, and so we
so
don't
you want
have
to hear
this.
about how we changed our name or why we changed our name?
Now, is this going to tell me that is this the straw that broke the camel's back on you yet?
No.
Okay, that's later. Okay, so let's do the COTP change. So
Yeah.
why was Order of Twilight changed to Circle of the Phoenix?
Yeah. So let me think here. Okay, so I had put an officer in charge, and she was really really nice. She was a total sweetheart. Everybody liked. And then so I gave her the guild leader position, and she ran with it for a while because I was doing other stuff. I was playing City of Heroes, and I was playing. No, Star Wars hadn't come out yet. I was really into City of Heroes at the time. That's all I wanted to play. And so I left the guild, and in another person's care. And then she decided that she had had enough, so she handed it off to yet another person, and this person went on a complete power trip and like started kicking people out and demoting people, demoted me, started locking the boards down, and eventually got to where he was even like deleting, not even archiving, but just deleting like really, really important historical posts. Like the history of Order of Twilight was in multiple parts. It was like this living document that had been added to for several years. It's completely gone. It's wiped out. It's so sad.
Including like my post, like my
Yeah, a lot of your
original,
posts.
my
Yep.
stuff's all gone. I had a bunch of guides
Yep.
I wrote that I asked. Remember, I asked the other night. I'm like, "Can I get my guides?" And you're like, "No, they're gone."
Yeah, and he even went into the archives and deleted a bunch of stuff. Like it was mass chaos. Um, and we couldn't get him. So I came back because I was hearing about all this, and everybody was like, "What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do?" So I came back, and we all had a meeting. We're like, we don't really have a choice. We even filed tickets with Blizzard, and they said there's nothing you can do. I mean, the guild's handed over to him. He has full, complete admin and rights to it, and it's our hands are tied.
Wow.
So, so we were like, well, the only thing we can do is just leave and start over. And we were like, well, it's gonna be a name change anyway. So we at least we won't have to worry about the sparkly vampires and stuff like that
If
anymore.
we tell about that, because Order of Twilight, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, like the Twilight books and movies. I don't know if the books had been out. I don't think they had, and I definitely know the movies hadn't when we came up with the name. And everybody was, but when they did, everybody was like, "Oh, so you guys are like vampire fans? Yeah, cool." It's like, no.
Oh no. Well, it's you can't blame them. You know what I mean? Like it's not.
Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, so that was one of those cases where you just can't trust people sometimes, and even somebody that you trust can still inadvertently, unintentionally let you down in a really, really major way. So
Right.
that's what happened in that case. Oh, and then there's another one. This is older. This is going back. This is like way back towards the beginning. We had this. We had a role playing council, and we had this guy that was the lead of the role playing council, and he was like a warlock, and he was really, really into this whole warlock
Oh, this is good.
thing.
Dude. This is good.
and and he was hardcore, and he's very creative, and he had this initiation ritual that he would have people go through in order to become officers in the role playing council, and he'd take them to the basement of the Stormwind Cathedral and have them like lay in one of the coffins there, and then they'd rise up, and they were like they died and they were born again into the role playing council, and it was like ooh.
So weird. That was a guy who was a strange guy, man.
Yeah, yeah, he was a hoot, and then so I mentioned the history of Order of Twilight, the post that living document that we've been writing for several years. He took that and turned it into a role playing. He like put an RP spin on it, and like with dialogue and everything, and then he had it printed and professionally bound like in a book form and sent it to me. So that was really neat. I still have it. I still have it. It's one of my most treasured possessions.
That's good. At least you have that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh man, that's crazy. So tell.
He was also one of those ones that kind of flipped out eventually and became like completely unstable, and
Those role
we
players.
had to get rid of him.
Those role players.
Sad. It happened a lot back then. Like there were at least 4 or 5 people that I can think of that just melted down. They were so cool, and then all of a sudden they just melted down.
I try to see, even in those times, I try to see the best in people. Most people are inherently good, and I think that the reason some people do bad things is because something is bothering them mentally or personally.
Yeah,
Like, I'm sure
yeah,
that they were all those people were good, but like the only thing they had in life in life at that time was like WoW rating or WoW role playing, and when that was challenged in any way, they knew how to do was lash out.
yeah. It's and I think maybe part of it's also the just the genre in general and the kind of people that it attracts, especially like online role playing games. And not to disparage those kinds of people because I'm obviously one of them, but uh, it's still like, we tend to be people that we might not socialize as much, or we might not socialize in the same way. We've got really strong opinions about things, and there's the whole entitled gamers stereotype, and they're all the big review bombs. I mean, we're still the gaming industry. We're still doing it. Like we're some of the worst people in the whole world, and I'm one of them. So I just try to be good, but I know there are a lot of crazies in the
Well,
in the
when you
field.
start talking about that, we could get into like a whole multi-thing discussion about that. So we're gonna really
Yeah.
hard left on that because
Yeah.
before
Anyway,
we
but
ended up.
backing up,
tell me
backing up.
about.
But the
Tell me
story you're
about.
looking for,
I want to know
I
the
want to I
end.
want to get
This
to
is there
that
was a
because I don't
camel's
want.
back broken, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is the one. Now I managed to hang on for probably like almost a year. No, about 6 months. That's about all I. Yeah, that's about all I could do after that. So this was after Panda. The guild had gone like way way downhill. The members were like had dropped precipitously. There were like 6 to 10 people online during peak, if that. At one point, I think it even got down to like 2 or 3.
Did you ever think about ending it? The guild?
No, no,
Never.
because the legacy we had gone for so long, it's like it can't die. This can't die.
Right, of
So
course.
I put aside everything, all my priorities, everything else I was doing, and I rushed in to save the guild as best as I could. And so when I alluded earlier to the rules, the rules had gotten like way out of hand, and they were just we had tried to codify every little possible thing that people could do. So that was one of the first things I was like, let's simplify all this. We got too many rules. Let's just get back to the spirit of things and just leave it at that. So that was one of the like overhaul revamp kind of things.
Right.
But during that time, the guild had mostly been run by a guild leader and then 2 of our main loyal officers. And one of these officers was somebody that I had known for years. We had been in the guild before I'd gone like on break. I think this hiatus was probably close to a year or two. But anyway, so I knew these people really well, and they carried the torch, through these really really dark times. To the guild had almost died. And I came back in, and the existing guild leader at the time, I asked her to hand it back over, and she was hurt. She was hurt really bad, and I felt really bad. I was like, I don't. She left the guild, and I couldn't talk her into staying. I couldn't. No matter what I did, I couldn't convince her that she was welcome and that she was appreciated. She just
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel like that.
Right.
So that was hard. That really hurt. But then what really got it was that one of the officers that we had kind of developed a little bit of a clique and sort of had like a little following, and she liked to be really vulgar, like really vulgar, like not family friendly. And we tended to try to be a family friendly guild for the most part, at least in public. We were like, you can say whatever you want if it's a private group channel, as long as everybody's okay with it. But in public or in like guild groups, that's not, we don't do that anyway. But she did, and she kept doing it, and we couldn't talk her out of it. So finally the officers all got together and said, you're gonna have to demote her. And I was like, yeah, you're right, and I really don't want to.
Right.
So I had that conversation with her, and I usually pace around Stormwind when I'm talking to people, and she was blindsided. She didn't see it coming. She had no idea. And even though we tried to coach her, we tried to guide her, but I don't think she realized how serious it was.
Right.
And by this point, there was no going back, and I just had to demote her, and she was crushed, and I was crushed. I mean, I cried really really hard because I cared about this person so much, especially
Yeah.
after all she'd been through.
Mm-hmm.
And that that's pretty much when I lost my will to be a guild leader, because I couldn't handle the emotional impact of it anymore. I still carried it for several months after that, and we got our rating going back, and, we got everything going back to the way it needed to be. We had act good members. Like, uh, um, we had a good turnout, in the evenings. We had 10, 15, 20 people online.
Right.
Everything was real healthy and going good. So I was like, okay. And I told people, I was like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to help you guys get back to fighting shape. And then I'm probably not going to stick around because by this point, I couldn't just stay with one game anymore. I had to be hopping around all the time. So I was like, I meant to stay there for at least a year, but I made it about 6 months. This is Warlords of Draenor, and
Who did you
and
eventually
then
hand it
my
over to?
my sister, she was doing really well. She was very very active,
Well, can
and
I talk a little bit about it?
yeah,
Yeah. This, so Rain Breeze is who he's talking about. She's the she led for. I came back in Legion, and of course, who do you think what do you think the first thing I did was I went back and I went slash who Order of Twilight. What? Who's nobody? They've got to still be around. So I did. So I went to orderoftwilight.com. Oh, it's Circle of the Phoenix. So I did who Circle of the Phoenix, and I saw he had been talking about him earlier, a guy named Kirok, and I was like, yo, you guys are still around. Let me get in. And they got me in, and I found out that Rain Breeze was the guild leader, and she had been there since Vanilla, kind of on and off, maybe I don't know. But I remembered the name, and she was the guild leader, and I was like, wow. Um, and we hit it off pretty good, actually. I had a good time. I ended up outpacing a little bit of. I wasn't a big fan of the pacing of the game, but um, Rain Breeze was did a did a did a really good job leading. I mean, everyone seemed happy every day. I know it. She had been going through some personal stuff, and as far as like a busy life, like we all have, and sometimes like life gets in the way of gaming. How dare it? And I know that I left for a while due to some medical reasons, and yeah, I know she had done well. I know I'm sure you have nothing but good things to say about how your sister ran everything.
yeah. I'm pulling up a video. It's a tribute video. I spent several hours on this video.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Well, why don't you, if you can link it. So, in chat, if you, yeah, there you go. Nice. If you ever, anyone
Yeah,
wants
so
to
I,
look at
I
that.
didn't I didn't do the music, I didn't do the performance, but I did the editing, and I
Oh,
and I had a whole footage of the guild
that's
that
awesome.
was laying on my hard drive. So I strung a bunch of clips together and timed it to the music, and I'm really proud of it.
Well, I'm glad you did that. I'm sure.
It was fun. It was
Nice,
fun, but I had
nice.
that song stuck in my head for a month.
Right.
I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm gonna. They asked me to do some more, and I'm like, I don't think I can do that anymore. These songs, they just get stuck in my head. I can't do it.
So, eventually, Raina stopped me from just real life stuff just caught up, and she had to hand the guild over to its current guild leader, a guy by the name of Dracelin, and he's a wonderful guy. I became really good friends with him during Legion. I was there when he made officer, by the way, Zan.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I was there when he became an officer, and he just embodies everything that the guild is about, and like the guild's still around. They are raiding tonight. Actually,
That.
their current rallying cry tonight is for Zanriel. So isn't that like just crazy? Like to think that you and I kind of found each other again at really like a really good time.
Yeah.
Just as I'm
Yeah.
beginning a new project, like with my guild and with Random Encounter, which, by the way, guys, we're going to talk about Zanriel's current gaming stuff. He should come and join the guild, right, everyone? Yeah. Yep, yep. Remember how we normally guilt people into maybe thinking about joining us? You're always welcome. You're always welcome. Visit, if you ever want to visit the website and I wouldn't interview you though because that would be biased and all that. Yes,
Yeah, I
join
did.
us.
That was, yeah, and I'm really glad to hear that from you because I did the same thing. Like, my mom wanted to come join, and I'm like, well, I can't be the one that interviews you. My
Yeah, yeah.
best friend from high school came to join. I'm like, somebody else is gonna have to interview.
Of course. So, why haven't you
Oh,
been
oh, by
playing?
the way, I do want to cover. I do want to cover this real quick.
Okay, you're more than
The
welcome to speak. We
person
have all night.
the person that ran the guild during the panda times that got offended and left. she came back eventually, and I was so happy to see her back.
Is
I
she
was like,
still
oh my
there?
gosh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to know. Don't. Yeah, let's not put any
And not
names in.
mentioning names,
Yeah,
but
no, of course,
yeah,
yeah.
real
Um,
sweetie. Everybody loved.
well, here's a Hobbit one hey to you, whoever you are that came back. So why haven't you been playing WoW? Tell us about that.
Well,
Just
yeah.
just just
So
because of the WoW, but there are actually some questions that I'll get into. Like, don't go too deep into it because I don't want to ruin everyone's questions. Just talk about why you're not actually playing WoW as a game.
yeah, I think a big part of it is some of the emotional triggers from the hard times that I've been through on that
Mm-hmm.
game.
Okay.
That's a big part of it, and then the other part is just that I don't know. Lately, I've been more into like sci-fi and superheroes and stuff like that, and I just tend to gravitate more towards the sci-fi superhero genre than fantasy these days. That's a little bit of it, and the other part of it is that I I have a tough time getting tied down to just one game. I always have to be hopping around, but I still so I hop on Star Wars, every like week or two. I'll hop on there and go through heroics. I'll jump on Star Trek Online and run around there. I'll jump on some other game, but if people expect me to be there like on a regular basis, then I just can't be that. And people and the WoW Guild, I just care for them so much, and I'm afraid they pull me back in. And then the other part of it is that like for the most of the first 3 or 4 years when I was running that guild, it was a literally a full time job. I probably put at least 40 to 60 hours a week into it. Even during the day, like while I was working, I'd be on the website posting and stuff. And I missed out on a lot of my child's growth during that time. She was just a toddler and stuff, and I still feel really bad about that. So on the weeknights and stuff, if I'm not hanging out with the family, I feel kind of guilty because I feel like I've got to make up for lost time.
Okay. Cool. And any games specifically you're playing right now?
Well, I mentioned those, some of the MMOs that I play sometimes,
You play any console
and then I
games?
have about no, not console games. I only have a PS3, and I only use it for streaming.
Okay.
But I also play like The Sims and a whole bunch of different random games like Dynasty Warriors and
Oh, I love.
just
Oh man, we just had a whole discussion about this on my channel about Koei games. Like I've been playing the Zelda, the Hyrule Warriors one.
oh yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
know. It almost makes me want to get a Switch just to
Oh, it's
play that.
so fun, dude. And there's like
Yeah,
you can't beat everything on it. It's crazy. You should come by
yeah,
the channel
and
sometime.
I just like those. I just like those beat 'em up games, where you
Oh,
just
they're
go
so
around and
fun.
swing a big sword and kill like 10 or 20 guys at a time. It's crazy fun. It's
And
stupid.
and you don't have to be good. You just
Yeah,
like do it.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's
You just button mash and you just feel like a badass. It's cool.
yeah, it's true.
And I also like the I think probably one of my all-time favorite series now is the Saints Row series because they're so over the top and wacky. I just love them.
Oh, okay. Cool. Nice. Um Just moving in before we start getting into the question and answer, which, by the way, boy, you got a bunch of lurkers today. We were all nice and chatty last time. Everyone's lurking today. That's okay. I see some people in there. I see you. um, so, what were your thoughts of when you found out I wanted to contact you? I came to your
Well,
sister first, and then yeah, she'd let you know.
well, I have to admit that I wasn't all that surprised because I'll never forget that Creed video you made.
Oh yeah, I did show that. There's a great tribute video. Yeah, of course.
Yep, yep.
It's
So I was
really
like,
corny. It's really corny.
oh, it's wonderful. It's so early 2000s. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people in my guild know what that is. If you don't, then you should go check our forums. It's on there. The fact that I had to go to your sister to get that, by the way, she found it.
Well, yeah, yeah, yeah. So you finally somehow convinced my sister. I guess it was hard for you to convince my sister to hit me up, or maybe she did. Maybe she did like a couple years ago. I don't know. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool. And I don't know what happened, but we just kept missing each other. And then finally,
I
she
was
was like, he's got to.
passive.
yeah, and then finally she's like, he's got a Twitch channel and a podcast and stuff like that, and he wants you on there. And I was like, hey, that sounds like fun. Okay, sure.
And then it turned into be like this emotional connection between us. Like we were
Yeah.
so glad. I was just like so glad to talk to you. And so, how different am I now than when you remember me? What's the
Well,
difference?
I always thought you were pretty chill, for the most part.
Right.
But I think you had a really sharp edge, and I feel like that has been ground down a little bit. It's not quite as sharp.
No, yeah, well, yeah. If you hang out on my channel for any length of time, you're like, dude, I'm gonna fall asleep because I'm so. I That's what it's all about in my channel is like being super chill and just chilling out and playing games together with people. So it's I've worked a lot on that, definitely. It comes out every once in a while, but yeah, I do my best. Yeah,
You've
Thally's got it right.
you've definitely grown up a lot. You're way more professional than you were when I was running around with you back then.
Yeah, for
We were all
sure.
kids. Well, I was
Oh
still kind of a
yeah,
kid back
yeah.
then. I mean, I was in my upper 20s, but still,
How
I
different are
didn't
you
really I
now?
didn't really grow up until I got into my mid to upper 30s.
How are you doing? Like, how are you different now?
Um, I'm
It's a tough
So
question.
the lessons that I've learned from being a guild leader have gone with me into my work life, and I'm working in a large corporate environment now, which I never imagined that I would, but I am, and I'm actually thriving in that environment, and a lot of it is because of the complexity that we had to deal with as the way we ran the guild. It really is, and I'm not exaggerating. I'm not making that up. Like we're dealing with like multiple things at a time, like really huge initiatives that have to have the participation of multiple other teams, and being able to manage like officers and junior officers that were all responsible for different areas of gameplay and stuff at the same time, and having to navigate all that has really helped in professional life, and taking those skills like into meetings and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I'm glad to hear you thriving. Yeah, I was just saying, hey CBX, what's up? I got a very special guest tonight on our WoW Vodcast. It's good to see you too. Yeah, nice, nice. Thank you, bro. Um, yeah, and I'm glad that you're doing really, really well. And I was like, when we started talking, and I was just like, boy, why didn't I thought about you a lot, like as far as like a important person in my life, but then I was always like, he forgot about. He doesn't remember me. He doesn't remember me. Like, there's no way. I was just another wheel in the cog. But anyways, we're,
Wait.
don't say it yet. I know. I think I know what you're gonna say. Hold on. Wait till we get to the questions. It might be in there.
Okay.
I know what you're. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, at this time, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna do questions and answers. So if you guys have questions, you can post them now at me or at Zanriel. Um, we're gonna go through the questions that were already pre-put in first by some of my guildmates. AM frequently says to this is for you, Zan. What was your guild's recruiting process 14 years ago, and did it change through the years?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Okay, so pretty much from the beginning, we've always allowed regular members to invite people to the guild, but it still required a procedure. And so at the time, you way back then, well, before we had a website, it was just an interview. You had to go through an interview with an officer. It could be any officer. But then once we had a website, then the requirement was that you had to sign up on the website and make a post on there. And eventually it became that it's at one point we revised that system, and we actually had a form that you went and filled out, and it was like a questionnaire, which was really cool because that way every new member application you would get all the bullet points. It's basically like a resume, which was really nice. But then people, Facebook came out and forums started becoming less and less of a thing, and people really balked and at the idea of having to go and register on some website. So we we eventually dropped that restriction, but we still made it a requirement for ranking up. So you could become a member without registering, but if you wanted to become a full member, you still had to register.
Okay.
And but the interviews have always been a thing uh, for and I don't know if this is still the
There's no
case,
more
but it was.
interviews.
Really, it's
Nope.
not interviews anymore. That's
Nope.
interesting. I did not
Yeah.
know that.
Rain Breeze
But
sold
I did.
me. Rain Breeze told me that they found that interviews were not making the toxic people that were joining any less.
Totally true. In fact, we used to go around and around about that because I also said the same kind of thing. As I was like, we can have whatever interviews we want, and it doesn't make any difference. I noticed that, but people weren't ready to give up when I was still running it. People weren't ready to give up on the idea of interviews. So I
Ooh,
was like,
that's something
okay,
you and I
we'll still
disagree
do
on.
interviews, but you don't know what a person's like until they're actually a member of your guild and
That's
you're
true.
actually grouping with them.
That's true. All right, I'm going to move on here to the next question from Thali, who's in the chat right now. What made you want to become a guild leader? I think we touched on that a little bit. What was the most, okay, so let's jump to this part of it. What was the most rewarding part of it, and what was the most challenging?
Okay, so well, there's two questions. So which one do you want me to
What
answer?
was the
What
most
made me
rewarding
want to
part of
become
being a
a
guild
leader,
leader?
or what was the most rewarding and challenging?
Start with what was the most rewarding part of being a guild leader?
Okay, the most rewarding part, and it's what really gets me. This is what brings tears to my eyes when I'm watching a show. I love seeing people overcome things. I love seeing people achieve things, and I love building people up. I just really, really like it. So when I see like a group of people coming together and achieving a goal, or even an individual that rises up through the ranks and overcomes like um, maybe like character flaws that they had or personality flaws or whatever, and they kind of pull it together and they're like, I'm not gonna be blowing up at people anymore. I'm gonna be cool. I'm gonna be professional. To see that is so rewarding. I love it. That is by far the most rewarding thing.
Yeah, okay. And what was the most challenging part about being a guild leader?
Having to say no to people, having to demote people, having to come down on people, the discipline aspect of it. I was never any good at it, and at one time I even had like an attack dog as an officer that I could send out for dirty jobs like that.
Hmm. Wow. All right, cool. Eric Valensteed, this is actually a very brand new member of my guild. He says, "Have you ever thought of leaving the game?" Which you did. And how did your position as a guild leader affect that decision? That's a good question.
Okay, now yeah, that is a, and that's that was really really hard. I felt like I was abandoning these people. I felt like I was letting them down, or I would have if it wasn't for the fact that I had complete and 100% trust in my sister, because I knew that she would not let me down, and by extension, she wouldn't let the guild down because she didn't want to let me down. So I
Hmm.
knew that we were going to be in good hands with her. But previously, like the time when I left right before Panda, I the decision was a lot harder, and I agonized over it. And
Hmm.
then the other thing is the social aspect of it, because you miss that, you miss that camaraderie and like hanging out on voice chat and going on raids and doing stuff together. So I knew that I was giving up a major part of my life and that I was going to be moving into a different phase in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was scary, but I think ultimately it's what I had to do.
It says, yeah, and that kind of follows up. He says, also, how often does being a guild leader interfere with other life commitments, and how often does being a guild leader win out?
Yeah, and it depends on your level of dedication. It depends on how much you take it personally. But for me, and the way I tend to internalize things like that, it became all consuming, and it was to the point where there was there was no higher priority than the guild, and that's not healthy. And that's another reason why I left, is because I can't you can't sustain that long term. If you've got a family, you've got wife, kid, whatever, you have to put them first, and
It's
that's
true.
you have to put them first, and you also have to put yourself first. It's like put the oxygen mask on yourself before helping the person next to you.
Ah,
So you've got to have that
I
balance.
say that all the time, dude. That's really creepy. I talk about that on my. I say that on my stream a lot. That's really weird that you said that.
Yeah, I mean it's a valid metaphor. It applies to a lot of different things,
Yeah.
and it's important. And a lot of people lose sight of it. They think that you're supposed to be all selfless and helping other people and putting other people's first, and that is true to an extent. But if you're not there for other people, then how are you going to help them? And
Yeah.
if you're not taking care of yourself, how are you going to be able to take care of other people?
I don't know if you saw chat there, Zan. P. Fritz was talking about. He's one of my members of my guild as well. And he was a guild leader, it looks like, and he said he couldn't live with the disappointment he was perceiving in himself when he had to leave WoW for the first time. So I'm sure you can empathize with him a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really hard because you've put so much of your heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into it, and you feel like you're not being a good steward. You feel like you're throwing something away, like you've been given this gift. You've built this community, and why would you want to throw that away? Why would you want to walk away from that? And it is a very like you really beat yourself up
I
over
had to
that kind
do
of
it in
stuff if you can, like
FF14.
if you care.
I had to do it in FF14. It was awful. It was awful. It was like the worst feeling. It was like a gut wrenching feeling, you know. But
Yeah.
my health came first, and that's what it was. So, um, moving on. Actually, one
Yeah.
of my officers has asked a question. There's actually a couple of them. Thali was an officer as well. Zarya asks, "Oh boy, here it comes. Could you tell us a funny story that happened while you were guild leading? Bonus if it involves Hobbit."
Well, I already told you about the incident with the bubblegum pop, and that's probably one of the funniest, cringiest ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. Uh,
Well, what was the thing
boy,
you
I'm really
remembered
bad
me
at that
for?
kind
What
of
did you
stuff.
remember me for?
Oh, yes. Yes. Okay. Now I know where this is going. So, about 2 or 3 weeks before I knew that you were looking for me, I was just telling somebody at work. I was like, I knew this guy. He was in our guild, and he did the best Emperor Palpatine impression that I've ever heard in my whole life. I wish I could do anything even half as good as that.
And I still do it. I still do it in chat because never will you take over the dark side of the Force.
It's just so perfect.
Your faith in your friends is yours.
Yeah.
Awesome. Gonna move on with the questions. That one's for Zarya. Classic Meh asks, another one of my guild members, what single experience while leading your guild stands out to you as having made it worthwhile or lead you to not miss the game? Hmm. So, what single experience while leading your guild stands out to you as having made it worthwhile?
So
That's a really
I think
specific question.
I think I kind of touched on it before, and I don't know if I can point to a single experience because it was just kind of the way we did things. And I don't know. I hope we're still doing things that way, but it's the way we mentor people. And I've touched on it multiple times. It's like the highlight, but that's what made it most worthwhile is mentoring people up to like officer position, especially like when you see somebody go from regular member to officer, that is like so cool because they had to go through so much to get there, and we were serious. One of my favorite quotes is from one of my coworkers. I've heard that's the first time I heard it. He said, "No, it's temporary. Yes, it's forever." And that is so true when you're promoting officers. You can say no, but that doesn't mean they'll never be an officer. But as soon as you put them into that position, if they're not exactly the right fit, it can cause a lot of damage. But when you do get somebody that's the right fit, it's it's fantastic. It's
What you
outstanding.
said something to me the other day, Zan, about no. You would say no, but show me why you should, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No, now convince me.
Right, because asking to be an officer is I mean, pretty ballsy, kind of, huh? I mean,
Yeah, because people have
that
all
means you
kinds of
you
different
better want it, right?
motivations.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, so people. a lot of people want to become an officer because they want to be part of that club. They want to be able to hang out in the teachers' lounge and be a fly on the wall and see all the gossip and stuff. Some people want to be an officer because they enjoy the power trip. They want to have that status and that title, and they want people to look up for to them and salute them and stuff. And then there are people that want to become an officer because they want to serve people. They want to help people in a higher capacity. Those are the people you're looking for, and you're trying to weed out the other categories. And it can be pretty hard because people are tricky.
Yeah, so people are very good at pulling the wool over the proverbial eye, so to say as
Yep.
well. So was there a single experience that leading your guild that stands out, like one actual real like,
Oh yeah, yeah. There is one. This one stands out. Actually, there were a lot of them, but this is probably the one that stands out to me the most. This is way early. This is vanilla WoW. Everybody's struggling to level up. Everybody's struggling to make gold, and I managed to get a horse. It was just a basic horse. I got up to level 60. I couldn't afford the nice horse. It was what was it, like 100 gold or something?
the
Like,
nice one was 700 or 800?
yeah, I mean, it was a lot, and it was way more than I thought I would ever have. And I don't even remember now who bought it for me, but
We all
somebody
did.
bought me that
We all
horse.
did.
Everybody went to Yeah, everybody pitched in and
We all
bought me
put
that.
in 5 gold. Like a
Yeah,
bunch of
and
people put in five. Yeah.
it was this big ceremony. They made a big ceremony out of it. They handed it over to me. I equipped it and mounted it, and that was definitely the high point. By far, that was the high point of my guild. Early on, I know, but oh, it was just such a beautiful moment. All the outpouring of love from everybody.
That
That was
is a
really
really
cool.
nice moment. I remember putting into that. Even after I had another member of our guild accuse me of buying gold.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the story you were digging for, but
No,
that
no,
was
I
it.
wasn't. No, no, I wasn't. No, nope. I would just wanted to. I didn't know. I didn't know. Oh, this is a good one from Scherner in my guild. She
Oh,
asks.
sorry. They did it again later.
Oh, did they?
The griffin. Yeah, I couldn't afford the
Oh,
really nice griffin,
oh, I
and
see.
they bought me one.
Okay, yeah,
I was so bad at money.
it's okay. Scherner asks, "What would your oh, is she trying to say something here? What would your best advice be for someone who is a guild leader now?" Actually, and
Oh.
it's interesting. Yeah, so this is a kind of a weird position we found ourselves in, isn't it? Um, so I'm a guild leader now.
Yeah. So what's
Okay.
my advice for you, right?
Well, yeah, or any other guild leader, yeah.
Yeah, or any other guild leader.
And I'm interested.
Let, listen to your people. Like, listen to the people that have ideas. Um, don't be an island. Don't ever be an island. Lean on the people that are around you. One of my favorite quotes was, it's an epitaph. Supposedly, it's the epitaph of the Carnegie guy, not Dale Carnegie, but the one that did all the steel industry. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
supposedly his epitaph says, "Here lies a man who knew how to surround himself with people who were smarter than himself."
It's true. Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Andrew Carnegie.
Fritz,
Yeah,
there with the save.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then for a long time I used, and I still have it in my signature on the website. It probably goes to a dead link now, but it was a link to a post of like people skills, how to get along with people, and it was mostly just like a summary of like Dale Carnegie type things.
Right.
Put the other person's interest first. That's sound advice. I mean, there's a reason why businesses spend thousands of dollars putting their employees through those programs, because it actually works.
Oh yeah, of course it does. Yeah. Let me my and just I'm gonna kind of come back with one here. Not come back. I want to tell you I have my quote on my signature on my webpage, and I want to hear it. So here's mine, and this is I put this together like with a lot of care. I know what a guild is supposed to be. A place for friends, for people who help one another, not a place where those at the bottom are used by those at the top.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. That's an excellent philosophy.
And it looks like I have 6 applications waiting. Lovely. And I just went to go read it. I wanted to make sure I got the reading, and like the alerts showed up. I was like, oh, that'll be nice to look at no after.
Yeah, you never fail. That never fails to generate an endorphin rush
Yeah,
when you see new
yeah.
signups. It's like instant endorphin rush.
I don't know if it's six. It just says six. Thou. That was one of my officers, by the way. Fritz says, and that's a good leadership advice. To surround yourself with people smarter than you. I have some really good officers and some really awesome members. Well, all my members are awesome, but my officer corps right now is amazing. Thank you guys. You've helped me so much through like this game that isn't even out yet, and we're going crazy over it, but it's gonna be great. Yeah. I have one more question that was written already. This is from another one of my officers, Grizzlar, or Webslinger, as he's known in the chat here. Um, should you ever decide to start another guild, what would you do differently?
I'd probably stay small. I would stay just big enough to be able to do most of the content, but I don't. I wouldn't want to go like all out, and I would probably also stay casual. I'd be more focused on alts and just a little bit of in game progression, but I would probably make it pretty clear to everybody that we're not a progression guild. That we're just here to basically like what you're doing, or what it sounds like you're like some of the stuff that I've seen, the way you're describing
Yeah, well, we're
your setup.
casual. We're casual, but those that do the raiding part of it, if you're going to get into the 40-man raid, that is like it's not hardcore. We're going like twice a week, right? But when we're in there, it's like this we mean business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
play your best, but
yeah.
don't go in because you have a responsibility to your team when you're in a group, and you're going to make their experience miserable if you're just half-assing it, and so
Oh yeah,
that's inconsiderate to be, when everybody's trying really hard to be the one that's the slacker. So it's just common sense, common courtesy to put all your effort into an encounter if it's a difficult one, but at the same time I wouldn't want it to be like the main focus. I wouldn't want people to be disappointed that we weren't moving fast enough.
no, and I've been stressing that. You know what? This vanilla thing, this WoW Classic thing that's coming out, it's not going anywhere. Like vanilla's vanilla. It's already set. There's no like they're not coming out with anything new, so we can go slow and it doesn't matter. So, but we will try our best, and if we're the best, then we're the best. If we're 17th best, then we're 17th best. It's it'll be what
Yeah,
it is, and
yeah.
and I'm okay with that. Um,
Just having people to hang out with and talk to and have fun with is the most important thing.
yes, it is, and I'm learning that it's amazing to see how active my guild is. I'm getting 20 to 30 posts on my website, um, and like almost 100 messages sometimes if it's a crazy day on my Discord. And the game's not out yet. And I'm like, I'm so thankful that everyone's being so things. What about between pulls? Can you joke? If it's on farm, I would presume, but with each other, I don't. Well, that's a whole other thing, Isaac. Like it's I don't think it's a good time for us to talk about that on the vodcast, but I can definitely bring it up with you like afterwards if you don't mind.
Hey,
Like that's
not
all.
to step on any toes, but let me just toss something out there. You're going to be a major buzzkill if you're telling people they can't joke around. But on the other hand, if people are doing too much horseplay, you have to come down on it because
Right.
again, it comes down to being considerate, and everybody's there to get through this encounter. And if they're struggling with it and there's a lot of joking around, people are going to get upset.
Right. Yeah. So it'd be very dependent on the situation, right? Like, and if I'm big on class leaders, by the way, Zan. Um, and to me, it's and which is something Order of Twilight did as well, actually.
Yep, yep, we did that,
Yep.
and it's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Highly recommended.
Right. And really, I mean, we'll see. Everything is a good raid. Um, adapts to the situation. You know what I mean? That's yeah. If you're struggling, yeah, joking's probably not the best thing. You know what I mean? If you can't, that's probably not the. But if we're just smoothly running through everything like butter, then yeah. But the problem is also you got 40 people, and that's a whole other thing as well. 40 people all trying to. joke
Yeah.
around gets. It sounds like you know a mob or
Yeah.
something.
I just know from experience that people will get pissed if there's too much horseplay, and then people get too stressed out if there's not enough. So there has to be a little bit of both. There has to be a little bit of balance.
A little
You got to
bit,
take it
yeah.
seriously, but you also have to be willing to, like, you know, remember this is just a game.
Yeah, of course it is. It's just pixels. Remember that, guys. If does anyone have any other questions? While just gonna give it a couple more seconds here to open up to questions, and if there isn't, I'm gonna go ahead and say now that it was a great honor having you on today, Zan, and I think that this was a great way for us to like just reconnect. And you and I, we talked a bit, and Zan and I are going to try to forge a little bit of a relationship. If that means just chatting online once a week, then that's what it means, or whatever else. Hey, and there's talk of what didn't you say something about content?
I think creating content is important. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's important to have a creative outlet, and I do enjoy like stringing clips together. It's fun,
Well, let's see.
and I
Who
have a YouTube
knows?
channel, so
Uh,
I need to be putting some more stuff on there.
who knows? And so right now, it's him and I are just gonna work on being friends, and that's an important thing because you can never have too many good friends in your life. I want to thank everyone else that came. Thank you for Circle of the Phoenix slash Order of Twilight. Thank you those from Random Encounter. That oh yeah, yeah. Wait a second. Oh, they're gonna get you. Didn't you say something about joining the guild? Yeah. Oh, maybe. No. Right now, me and Zan are just gonna try to become friend, like rekindle our friendship, and then if that happens, I told him he's welcome, and he knows he's welcome, and it's up to you. And I don't want you to feel ever like pressured into that. I want you to do it because it's fun. And as you know, Random Encounter is all about doing what you want and never getting judged for playing the way you would like to. Unless with rating, of course. And then, yeah, there's some, the rating has a little different aspect. But other than that, um, it's that. And I want to thank everyone from Random Encounter, Circle of the Phoenix, right here in the Shire on the Hobbit Bilbo Man channel, which is me, of course. And you can catch me 6 days a week, usually starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What are we working on? Oh, Chrono Trigger. We should be back to Chrono Trigger maybe tomorrow? I think so. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Awesome. And and I want to thank you all so much. And until next time, thank you so much, Zan, and everyone else. And I'm Hobbit Bilbo.